So, by the way, I know that you're not a big fan of the Fed. I've seen you wear a hat and the Fed. Is there any chance we're ever going back to the gold system?
That's a can of worms. I don't, without getting into too much complexity, I don't really know there's a difference. Most people think that under a gold standard that it acted as some sort of constraint on the monetary system. And based on my research, I cannot see any examples of that whatsoever. So let me give you some specific numbers. At the end of the 1800s, we were on probably the most proper gold standard in U.S. history. So we'll just use the time frame from 1880 to 1895. All right, under a strict gold standard. So most of the people in the sound money space would say, okay, this is optimal. Right? Because this is going to put a constraint on how many currency units are created. It's going to put a constraint on government spending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Because you can redeem those currency units for gold. And then they would say now that that Nixon in 71, he took us off the gold standard. Now we've just had money printing left and right and, fiat currency this, fiat currency that.
We printed during COVID, 40% of all money printing?
25% of M2 went up by 25%.
Was that the final number, 25%?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
So they say there's just no constraints whatsoever, so we need to go back to that system. But what's interesting is if you look at M2 money supply growth, from 1880 to 1895.
What's an M2 exactly?
That's just basically a measurement of how many how many dollars are in like checking.
You guys writing this down? What's going on? M2. Sure. Let's go. Take notes.
So like checking and savings accounts. Let's just, for the sake of keeping it super simple, let's just say if you combined all the dollars that are in checking and savings accounts in the United States, that would give you your M2. So how many currency units are chasing goods and services? We
all just learned something, by the way.
Yeah, so it was right around 150% that M2 grew from 1880 to 1895 when we were under that strict gold standard. Now, if you look at 2008 to 2023, and I use that time frame specifically because that was quantitative easing. That's when the Fed expanded their balance sheet. Everyone says that was money printing this and money. That's when the central banks just went absolutely ballistic.
What year was that,
politicians
George?
Lost their mind. 2008 is when we started quantitative easing in the United States. If you look at 2008 to 2023,
Greenspan, was that under Greenspan?
No, Bernanke.
That was under Ben Bernanke?
Yeah, so that was a separate 15-year time frame, right, when we just had profligate spending from the government and everything that the sound money guys don't like, including me. I don't like that stuff either. But the M2 money supply grew by 150%, the exact same. So whether you're on a gold standard or a strict fiat standard, we still had money supply growing at the same rate. So why is that? Because at the end of the day, the people who quote unquote print money are not the politicians, not the Federal Reserve, it's the banks.
The banks.
It's the banks. So the banks can create as much money as they want under a gold standard, and they can create as much money as they want under a fiat standard. And really what constricts or constrains the banks is the lack of government intervention. Because what constrains the banks is the chance of them losing money, their profit and loss, their balance sheet is really what constrains them. So if a bank is creating currency units out of thin air, but they're doing that without the backstop of the Fed, without an implicit bailout, then they're going to be creating those currency units for what? For productivity. They're going to lend to people that they think can pay them back plus interest. So they're going to lend to business owners. They're going to lend to people like Pat.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what is going to advance society forward, right? What happens is
he creates jobs and opportunities.
That's right.
Goods
So if
and
you're
services,
if you're a bank and you're giving out a loan, you're going to say, okay, well, can this person pay me back or not, right? Plus interest, and usually those people are going to be able to produce stuff, and that's how they're going to pay you back, right? More than you're giving them in principal. So what happens is you introduce the Fed, you introduce the government. Now all of a sudden there's all these backstops. Now the banks don't have to lend for productive purposes. They can lend to buy Dogecoin.
Yeah.
Or they can lend for something else that has nothing to do with productivity. It has nothing to do with growing the wealth of society. It just simply has to do with speculation. And that's the environment that we're in right now. That's the problem. The problem isn't necessarily sound money. Believe it or not. The problem is government intervention. If we could get the government out of the equation, like we did, by the way, in the late 1800s, we had something called free banking.
Yeah.
Most Americans probably can't even fathom that, but we had no central bank, and the government really wasn't involved in the banking system at all. In fact, banks in the 1800s printed their own money. Literally, we call them bank notes. Where do you think we got that name?
Oh, gotcha.
So we didn't have in the late 1800s we did, but prior to the Civil War, we didn't have these green pieces of paper. Each bank had printed its own bank notes, which was.
So what would is that? I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but is there any chance that something like that happens again, or is it just like we're down
Well, there
too
is.
deep
It's
in
not
the
a zero
rabbit hole?
probability. Look at Argentina.
Yeah.
So the
with
problem,
Milei, your friend.
So the problem, because he wants to get rid of the central bank.
Yeah, he talks about
that's
that.
why I say that.
That's why he walks around with a chainsaw everywhere.
The problem isn't that it's not possible. The problem is that it has to get so bad in order for people to vote for that type of drastic change.
Right.
So if you look at Argentina, why did Milei win? Right? It's not that everyone that voted for him is a libertarian.
No.
They're
just sick and tired.
They're sick and tired of 150% inflation.
Yes.
Right? They're sick and tired of hyperinflation. So just give me anybody that won't give me this hyperinflation.
He's a change agent, and hopefully it'll deliver. Whoa. If you like that one, click right here to watch the full SOSCAST, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.